what it needs to show, so that if you're not currently reading on the right lines, perhaps with the kind of things you're doing to boost your personal statement, you can start making those changes now to get ready. It's about seeing the end game rather than just things from a day at a time and then finding out things you should be doing. Okay, so I'll hand it to them. Right, good afternoon. I am Jenny Marshall, and today I'm talking to you about marketing and excellent application. Now, whether you've decided you definitely want to go to university, or thinking now, forget it, I want to get a job, or perhaps even you want to do an apprenticeship, one thing you all have in common is that at some stage in your lives, in order to get where you want to go, you're going to have to write a fantastic application. Now, the good news is application forms themselves are pretty much the same whatever you are applying for. There will be a section on the qualifications you've achieved. There will be a section that contains a reference, and that's usually going to be from your school if you're applying for university, or sometimes from a previous employer if you're applying for a job. But the bit that makes you stand out head and shoulders above everybody else, who's basically going to have exactly the same set of qualifications as you on your job application, is a covering letter. On your application for an apprenticeship, it's a letter of application, and on your UCAS form, it's the dreaded personal statement. Now, the good news is, again, that if you get your personal statements right, you can use them as your job application covering letters for the rest of your lives. Because essentially, what you're doing with these application letters is you're telling the people you're applying to how incredibly interested you are in whatever it is you've applied for, but also you're saying, I'm brilliant, I've got all these skills, pick me rather than everybody else. Now, clearly you can't use those exact words, or you're going to come across as a tiny bit arrogant. So what I'm going to be doing today is showing you how to get down on paper all the things about you that admissions tutors, that employers need to know. It's all about being positive. I have got genuine examples of really excellent personal statements. I've also got genuine examples of the sort of rubbish that should never be written on an application form. The whole idea being, me speaking to you today, you all end up writing a fantastic application, whatever it's for, rather than writing the sorts of rubbish that ends up on my little piece of white paper being read out in the schools and colleges of London and the South East. This is not a good place to be. So, where do we start? Well, there are a few things to be aware of. Three key things, in fact. The first one to think about is who is going to be reading your application. Now, obviously, if you're applying for a job or an apprenticeship, it's going to be a company. So you need to make sure you've looked that company up on the internet. You need to know what that company does. Have they got international offices in Malaysia? And what is your role going to be within that company? Because that's got to come across in your covering letter. If you're applying for university, though, your application is going to be read by an academic. This is someone who has devoted their life to the study of something that you claim to have an interest in. So that means when you're writing your personal statements, it isn't just enough to say how interested you are, you've got to prove it. And that's where all the outside reading and taster days and masterclasses and all the other things come into it, and we'll be getting to that later. Next thing to be aware of, you haven't got much space. For those of you who've looked at the UCAS website, I'm sure you've been studying it for months, you will know that for your personal statements you have a total of 4,000 characters, including spaces. And to those of us that speak English, that's about 2/3 of the side of A4. It is not a lot of space. That means everything you say has to be relevant, concise and punchy. You cannot waffle, you can't waste space. Similarly, those job application covering letters, you cannot write a novel. People reading it get bored. So you should be able to get all the interesting things about you, your skills and your good qualities into about a side of A4. That is plenty for a covering letter. So again, concise, relevant and punchy. The third thing to be aware of is limited choices. When you're applying to university, you can't just stick down 5 random courses on your application form because you only write one UCAS form. It goes off to your 5 universities. They get copies. You don't write individual personal statements. And you have to remember that the universities, yes, they can offer more places to people who get A's and B's. Imperial College, by the way, isn't part of that because the A's and B's aren't high enough to actually get into any of our courses. So you have to make sure that you're making your personal statements focused very carefully on one subject area. You can't do what this young lady did. She wrote, "I am free in creative spirit, and I've been unable to narrow my choices down to one subject area. So I have chosen to study law because I believe in justice in society, and French because I like the language and the culture, and geography because I like volcanoes." And this went on for 5 totally unrelated courses.
Now, at the time, I was working at the London School of Economics. I was sitting there with the admissions tutor for the law department. And that's probably one of the most competitive law departments in the world. And we just looked at each other and we said, this young lady is not a free and creative spirit. She's a nutter, and with the best will in the world, we're not making offers to nutters. 2 reasons. First one, she's so floaty light and undecided about what she actually wants to do at university, she's probably going to end up changing her mind 5 times before her first Christmas, and she'll probably end up dropping out. That's not really a great use of one of our valuable offers. The second reason we don't make offers to nutters, let's face it, they can be dangerous, and who wants that in a tutorial situation? So if you want to avoid the pile called absolutely no chance of an offer, subheading nutter, please make sure you focus your course choices carefully on one subject area. That doesn't mean all the courses have to be called exactly the same words, because a lot of universities have slightly different names for what is essentially the same course. So you might like the idea of business studies, you may find 2 courses called business, one might be international business, one might be management, and one might be economics and management. The point is, your personal statement focuses on the area of business and management. There are exceptions, of course there are. If there's anybody who wants to apply for medicine or veterinary science or dentistry, you guys are only allowed to apply for 4 of those courses, because you guys are applying for the most competitive courses in the known universe. And that means you have a 5th choice on your application form for a backup. Put in a backup. Okay, not everybody's going to get into those 3 courses every year because there aren't enough places for the students who apply. That means you have that backup, so you have the opportunity, for example, of doing a biochemistry degree or a biomedical science degree or a zoology degree, depending what you want to go into, and then you can apply for the degree as a graduate once you've finished that first degree. It also gives you the chance to do 3 more years of work experience just to make sure you absolutely do want to spend the rest of your life being a doctor, a dentist or a vet. So that's what you do. You don't have to mention that backup choice anywhere in your personal statements. I work at Imperial again. We've actually seen lots and lots of applications coming in for our biochemistry courses that talk about medicine all the way through. We still make offers to those students because we know we're going to get some of you and we want the best. So please, if you're applying for those courses, put in a backup, very important. Second exception is if you're applying for joint honours degrees. Some of you might want to go for single honours, that's where you choose one subject, like maths. It's called single honours because there's one name in the title. Some of you might want to get a little bit racy though and combine the maths with something else, let's say philosophy. Immediately that has become a joint honours degree course because there's more than one degree name in the title, maths and philosophy. So you guys have to make sure that your personal statements talk about your interest in the maths half of the course and the philosophy half of the course, because 2 admissions tutors will be reading your application at each university and they both need to feel the love. Very important. Even if you only manage to find 3 courses called maths and philosophy and 2 are just called maths, you still mention both halves of that degree course. The final exception is if you're having to apply for general engineering or natural sciences at some universities, but other universities are expecting you to choose before you get there. For example, you like the idea of engineering, not sure which variety, but you've decided you want to do mechanical engineering at one of the universities that's asked you to choose. In which case, you have to make sure there's a nice big paragraph in your personal statement that isn't too general about engineering, that's actually very specific about the mechanical engineering you are interested in. Very important indeed. But everybody else, one subject area. And I meet people every year who say to me things like, well, I couldn't decide between criminology and photography, so I've applied for 3 of one and 2 of the other. And then they're amazed when they get no offers at all. But think about the admissions tutors. Limited number of offers, and you've just said, I'm really indecisive. Straight in the no pile. So don't give these people an excuse to reject you. Show your commitment to the subject area you are interested in. Right, next thing. Punchy starter for your personal statements. You've got to try and catch the eye of the admissions tutor. So this isn't one. I am studying media at A-level and I'd like to do it as a degree because I find it interesting. Full stop. Well, that's about one of the most boring things I've ever read on an application form, and it tells me nothing. I've already said at the beginning, you can't waste space. What that means is you have to make sure you're telling me more than just it's interesting. Why not tell me why? I've been studying business studies for the last 3 years and always found it captivating. In particular, I'm looking forward to focusing on marketing and human resources in much more depth at university, because what you've done there is you've said, it's interesting. And I've got some background knowledge in it, which is always handy, but also I've read that prospectus. I know what I'm getting myself into. That makes you a much safer bet for an offer. You're not just somebody who said, my friend's mum is a lawyer. She's loaded. I'm going to study law. Because that may be your only reason for choosing a law degree. I hope it isn't. But that must never come across in the personal statement. You've got to show these admissions tutors you understand about the academic demands of a law degree. You've read the prospectuses. Very important. Obviously, don't be too specific. If you're going for architecture, and the only thing you're interested in is the architecture of ancient Roman toilets, for heaven's sakes, don't say in your personal statement, the only reason I'm applying for architecture is for that particular module at that one university that's on the architecture of ancient Roman toilets. Because 4 admissions tutors are going to read that and say, well, they don't want us then. So you're cutting down your chances. But you can be very general about the areas you are interested in that are common to the 5 courses you've chosen. Okay, so let's move on from there. How many people here, quick show of hands, how many of you watch the news on a regular basis? That's not bad, hands down, fantastic. Okay, all of you must be watching the news on a regular basis if you want to write effective applications, because whatever you are applying for, there's going to be something going on in the world that is relevant to your application. For example, if you're applying for things like economics, I'd probably be a bit startled, as I was reading a personal statement last year, when the young lady didn't mention at all the global economic crisis. Slightly concerning, given that she was applying for economics. You need to make sure that the key stories are going into your personal statements because they are relevant. Marketing students, I'd probably be thinking about how on earth I was going to get the meat industry out of this particular problem with Findus lasagna. And horse meat, because that's a real marketing disaster, and some bright spark is going to have to spin it so that those companies don't go out of business. So that's marketing. Again, marketing, there was something last week about Oreo cookies, because in the final of the Super Bowl competition, the American football, the power went out and they just lost coverage for about 35 minutes. And so there was this big thing going around all the advertisers to see who could come up with the best Twitter feed. And Oreo came up with it. It got 150,000 tweets immediately. You can still dunk in the dark. Fantastic. Some genius is going to get a massive promotion just on that little slogan. So my point is advertising, marketing, loads of stuff for you guys. If you're applying for engineering, they've invented a new robot, so artificial intelligence. They've invented a new robot called the Cheetah. And this Cheetah can run faster than Usain Bolt. Fantastic. Unfortunately, they're going to be using it to kill people for military purposes, so that's not quite so good. But if you're going for artificial intelligence, that sort of thing should be in your application form. Materials engineering. You want to go and design the next fantastic big aeroplane. They seem to be a bit broken at the moment, the latest ones, but the material they're built out of was designed by materials engineers. Again, that should be in your application form. And there's probably quite a few law people sitting there thinking, yeah, I can relate to a few stories that have been going on in the news recently. There was an interesting one in the news today about a graduate who's just successfully won her case in the Court of Appeal to say that she shouldn't have been working in Poundland for free as a graduate, as one of these going back to work schemes. And she's actually won that case, which could have huge consequences for the government and also for job seekers. So there's lots of exciting stuff going on. There are probably a few literature students sitting there feeling a little bit smug at the moment. It's okay, I don't have to watch the news, I read Jane Austen. Actually, guys, you do have to watch the news, because quite often, when you go to an interview for English literature, for history, for classics, they will often say to you, can you think of somebody who's been in the news recently who would represent a very good equivalent, a modern equivalent, for one of the characters you've been reading about in your set text? And if you haven't actually watched the news at all, you're in trouble. So watch the news. It's a good idea and it'll broaden what you know. And that means when you get tricky questions in interviews, you'll have an awful lot of knowledge to help you try and answer them. And that's what it's all about, tackling tricky questions. So watch the news. Do some outside reading. I don't mean you've all got to rush off and read 400 big fat dusty textbooks for that to count as outside reading. But you can all read articles on the internet. Wikipedia, by the way, isn't always 100% reliable, please be warned, but you can actually look at things like New Scientist if you want to apply for science. There's bound to be an article in there that's exciting. You could be looking at the Law Society Journal or the broadsheet newspapers to find out a bit about the big legal cases. You could be reading The Economist for economic stories, all kinds of things. National Geographic. You should be looking at the National Health Service website if you're interested in healthcare or being a doctor or going into pharmacy. The point is, all of these are available for you, and any little snippet that you find that's exciting, you can include in your personal statements. The way you do it is you sort of say, it was while I was reading this particular article that I first got interested in this subject area. Then I went to a demonstration lecture at such and such a university, and I realised that the professor talking was one of the people mentioned in this article. So I read the book he wrote called such and such. That's the whole point. That's what you're showing. You're showing that you have this interest in the subject. You're proving it. I always get asked about quotations, though. Can you use a quotation in a personal statement? Well, I've got a couple of views on this. One is that I don't mind as long as it's a small quotation, and the second point is you use it appropriately. And there are 3 simple rules for quotations as far as I'm concerned. Rule number 1, please don't leave a quotation sparkling on the top of your personal statement like a Christmas decoration you never talk about anywhere else in the text. It confuses the hell out of the admissions tutors. They cannot work out why they've just read a lovely quote by Shakespeare on the top of a physics application because you haven't explained why it's there. So if you do want to use a quotation, tell us how it's inspired you. What did it inspire you to read or do as a result of reading it or hearing it in the first place? That is a good use of a quotation. Rule number 2, a friend of mine, geography professor, University College London, was alarmed a few years ago because he got a lot of applications that all landed on his desk containing a quote by Einstein. He realised very quickly there must have been a sixth form magazine that had gone to every single student in the UK studying geography, which contained this quote by Einstein. And the reason he realised that is because, unfortunately, the sixth form magazine had quoted Einstein incorrectly, and all of these students had faithfully copied down an incorrect quote. Now, if you want to avoid the Muppet pile, which is next to the Nutter pile, under absolutely no chance of an offer and you want to use a quotation, just check it carefully with an original source and note down who wrote it or said it in the first place. Otherwise, it's plagiarism and you do not want to go there. So accuracy is vital. Third rule for quotations, this is something I read myself a couple of years ago in an application form. Please avoid the temptation to quote yourselves as an example of excellence. You may think you are the world expert on something, but the admissions tutors may not necessarily agree. So 3 simple rules for quotations, and if you actually follow them, they're fine, okay? So moving on from there again, we've had some good starters. We've had a subject we've studied before, and we've identified the areas you want to look at in more depth. We've looked at quotations, great. We've got another bad one though. This guy's my favourite. He reappears later, you'll see why. I want to study telecommunications because I find it fascinating. My uncle works in the industry, and we often have chats about his future. Now, it's lovely the uncle has a future. It's lovely, and it's completely irrelevant to the application. Working where I do, I read hundreds of applications for medicine every year, and I've probably lost count of the number of applications I've read that say things like, my mother is a doctor, her mother was a doctor, her mother's mother was a doctor, way back since the dawn of time. Because sadly, that doesn't make us automatically think, quick, better make you an offer so you can carry on in the family tradition. Oh no. We have a mental picture of poor little you sitting there, surrounded by generations of your family, with a large machete, saying, and you're going to be a doctor whether you like it or not. It doesn't actually fill us with any confidence that you're going to last the course. We just think you're being pushed into it. So if your family members do happen to be doctors, or dentists, or lawyers, or teachers, or anything else vocational, by all means use it to show us you have a very realistic picture of how demanding yet rewarding these particular vocations are, but not, it's a family tradition, where's my offer? Because it cuts no ice at all with those admissions tutors. Okay, let's get on to some more good ones now, and this is where we start to get really whizzy. Can you look at the courses you've applied for, and can you try and summarise in a few sentences, or a couple of questions you know you'll be able to answer just by doing the degree, can you summarise what the course is all about for you? And these are some good ones. How the critical decisions of our country are made and by whom has always fascinated me. The consequences to society, be they political, economic or moral, are perhaps the reason for this. All that person's done is said this course about politics and stuff, but they've really worked on those 2 sentences. They polish them and they shine. They show that this student has a very clear idea of what they're getting themselves into. Makes them a much safer bet for an offer. This one is questions. Do MPs have any real power? Will war have an effect on the development of our society? It is questions like these which capture my interest in sociology and politics. You can pretty much start anything you like off with a couple of relevant questions, followed by, it is questions like these which capture my interest in maths, music, history. Doesn't mean to say you've got to know the answer to the question, because the whole point is you find that out when you do the degree. But obviously, if you're going to an interview, it's a really good idea to have a little look and see what you think the answer to the question might be. Otherwise, you're going to walk in and the interviewer's going to say, we love the questions at the start of your personal statement. Talk us through your ideas. And you're going to be sitting there going, I don't know, I was waiting for you to tell me, and that's not going to be a good interview. But questions are a really good technique for showing you know what the course is going to be all about, because you've done your homework and that's what they're looking for. It makes you a much safer bet for an offer. Okay, so that's some really good starters for your personal statement. Showing the admissions tutors you're really keen on the subject area, making sure they know that you know what you're getting yourselves into. That's really, really key. Now we move on to talking about yourselves. Now, when I said at the beginning you need to make sure you're talking about the subject-specific area, that's for the vast majority of your personal statement. I don't actually want to read any personal statements that have one little paragraph at the top saying, I really like the idea of physics, and then 2/3 of a page where you tell me how you've been a brownie leader or a cub leader for the last 5 years. Because the relevant bit is your interest in the subject and the proof that goes with it from your outside reading and your lectures you've been to. The other bit, though, you do have to tell us about is your skills and good qualities, because we need to know that you can hit the ground running. But where do you start? Well, I always say you need to think about the skills and good qualities we would want you to have, and then tell us you've got them. The trouble is you can't just give us a list. You can't say I'm a fantastic communicator with excellent presentation and debating skills. My teamwork's great, my leadership's marvellous, and I've got wonderful time management. Because sadly we don't believe you. What you've got to do instead is come up with a range of activities you've been involved in school, out of school, academic, non-academic, and just use them to show us how you feel you've managed to enhance your range of skills and good qualities. As I say, start with the academic. Well, let's look at what you're studying at the moment. If you're doing A-levels, you want to apply for law. At the moment you're doing maths, further maths, some kind of A-level in science, and you've done AS business studies. You don't try and find lots of complicated links between those subjects and law. What you do instead is look at the skills you've now got that would make you well prepared for a law degree. For example, studying maths and further maths means that I'm adept at working with numbers, and it's given me the skills to tackle problems logically. Tackling problems logically is a fantastic skill for a law degree, any other degree, or any job you ever want to go and do. You may have got your ability to tackle problems logically from doing maths and further maths. You may have got your ability to tackle problems logically from being the person on the Duke of Edinburgh Award expedition who had to take over the map reading when some idiot got you lost. I don't really mind. Whatever shows that you are a problem solver, get it in your application letter, because that means you're a good person to have around. You don't just burst into tears every time you get a little hiccup. So that's the point. Problem solvers, tackling problem logically, that is the sort of person we're looking for. It makes you an asset. If you've done any kind of A-level in science, you have the ability to research and analyse data. Fantastic for any job or any degree. If you've done AS business studies, it may have enhanced your essay writing, your ability to give presentations, research effectively on the internet. All perfect for anything you want to apply for. Literature students, you have excellent skills in evaluation. Anybody who's done drama, it may have enhanced your confidence and communication skills. Sport shows you have a very good understanding of the importance of motivation and good leadership in any successful team. If you've done art, it shows creativity and imagination. Any subject any of you are studying, that's a whole range of skills and good qualities you can tell us about. But we had a group of students we were working with who were struggling. And when we said to them, okay guys, tell us what you're good at, they were like, nothing. And we said, of course you are. Everyone's good at something. They were like, no, we've got nothing at all. We said, okay, if you're really stuck, ask your friends, because your friends will tell you what you're good at. And sadly, these students had no friends, because this is what they came back with. Now, on the first one, please excuse the poor grammar. And I'll say one word to you, and that's deadlines. And no, that was not in Swahili. You know who you are if you don't know what a deadline is. Please learn. The school is going to give you deadlines for when these personal statements need to be in. Very simple reason. Believe it or not, the teachers do not have endless hours of spare time set aside over the course of the autumn term for the sheer delight of proofreading your personal statements as they trickle in. So meet the deadlines, and you've got the best chance possible of the teacher spotting the dopey stuff, like this one. I'm a friendly and enjoyable person, and I'm never afraid to ask when I need it. And we're still not too sure what that young lady's not afraid to ask for, but do be a little bit careful with your double meanings. Love them in the office, they will not get you taken seriously. Like this young man who was very disappointed when we told him he couldn't write this. I thoroughly enjoy working horizontally with staff. Well, what he meant was he was on school council and he felt that elevated into the giddy heights of being a teacher. What he actually said was illegal, so please bear that in mind. Now the next two I don't always read out, for the simple reason that not everybody understands the main word from the first one. But I know you're a bright bunch, so I'm going to chance it with you guys, so here we go. This young lady had written a fantastic application, apart from this one word which she kept using. Law is such a fascinating profession, and I have always been extremely interested in soliciting. Now, yes, some of you know what soliciting is. For those of you that don't, look it up afterwards, but I'd just like to say soliciting has nothing to do with being a solicitor. Well, not much anyway. It also has nothing to do with the legal side of law. So be aware, spell checker is not your friend. What spell checker will do is it will spell what you have written correctly. It doesn't know what you meant to say. And believe me, you don't want words like soliciting coming up on any application form you're writing. This one, again, along the same lines, medicine application, this young lady had written, I wish to join the oldest profession because, well, I've got to tell you, the oldest profession isn't actually medicine. It is, in fact, soliciting. Now, we know that, the admissions tutors know that, and also the teachers know that, so they can actually read your applications and make sure you don't say anything daft. I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that you're trying to sound more intelligent, and you don't want to use simple language. Take it from me, use the simple language, use the words you understand. Don't try and get all flowery. It doesn't do anybody any favours. We've got another couple of new ones from last year. I like this one. I've enjoyed philosophy and ethics because it's taught me how to understand arguments, and I've really developed a sense of apathy. Now, apathy, I think she meant to say empathy. That means understanding other people's points of view in a sympathetic manner. Apathy means kind of boredom and can't be botheredness. She's just told me she's bored and she can't be bothered. Not really a great impression. And my new absolute favourite, I've always wanted to be a midwife, because I want to work with women all the way from the conception to the birth. Yes, if she gets that involved, they're going to be complaints, just so you know. This is another medicine-related one. This young lady was trying very hard to think of a skill she could tell me about. She ended up really rather scraping the barrel. I enhanced my non-verbal communication skills, particularly hand gestures. Yes, my mind works like that as well. And one final bad one before we get to the good ones. Just shut your eyes when I read this one out and see what you picture. Here we go. My friends tell me I am very loyal and obedient. Anybody else seeing a small dog? Obviously, qualities such as loyalty and obedience are very valuable in small dogs, but in sixth form students, in future employees, the sorts of things we want to be reading in your application forms. We want to know you thoroughly enjoy participating in a whole range of different activities. We want to know you're motivated, determined, hard-working. We want to know you thrive on challenge. You love tackling problems logically. We want to know you're versatile, imaginative, flexible, creative. All these words, and thousands like them, are incredibly positive, and they should be bursting out of your application forms. Put yourselves in my position. If you had to choose who was going to be on your team for the next 3 years, 4 years, or even longer, do you pick the people who say, I'm so excited about doing all these different activities. I'm motivated, I'm enthusiastic, I'm hardworking, I'm an independent learner, and I cannot wait to get stuck into the job or course I've applied for? Or do you pick the people who say, well, I'm a bit of a spoon really, I just sit there staring out the window waiting to be told what the homework is. I'm no trouble to anyone. I know who I'd pick, and I'm the sort of person who does the choosing. So make sure I am the sort of person you are impressing with your application. Make it dynamic, make it positive. There is no space on any application form for a negative word. Medicine applications again. I've often been told I'm the sort of person who gets bored very easily. And then I discovered the ever-changing world of medicine. Yeah, I didn't get past the word bored in the opening part of that sentence. And if you think I'm making offers to people who use words like bored or boring, think on. So keep it positive. Don't give us an excuse to put you in the no pile. These are good ones. I've really enjoyed sitting on college council, where all school matters are brought and important decisions made. This, together with much public speaking, has increased both my confidence and communication skills. That person wanted to tell me they can give a presentation. That's kind of what you have to do at university. You listen to the lecturer, they speak to you for a while, then you go to your little tutor groups, you'll take it in turn to write presentations, and you'll actually talk to your little tutor group about things you've observed in previous lectures. So if you know you're going to have to write stuff and then give presentations and discuss it, you might as well tell us you can do all that already. This person has the confidence to give a presentation for doing something on college council. For every single one of you in here, your confidence to stand up in front of a small group of people could have come from something completely different. You may have done school plays, school assemblies. You may have done presentations in history lessons or biology lessons. But it could just be you're sitting there thinking, I can give a presentation, how hard could it be? The last time I did anything like that was back in year 7, I read out a poem. Please don't write. Once in year 7, I stood up for 5 minutes. This has made me a confident communicator, because obviously that's rubbish. What you do instead is you say, through participation in poetry reading competitions, school plays, school assemblies, I feel I've developed my confidence sufficiently to deliver excellent presentations. It's not about when you did the activity or how long for, it's what you get out of it that counts. So through participation in is a handy phrase. Here's another good one. The philosophy and ethics course I have followed has taught me to consider all points of view in a debate and support my own views through rigorous arguments. That's the discussing your ideas part of being at university. This person's done discussions in philosophy lessons. You may have done them in general studies or critical thinking. You may have done them in English lessons. Or it could just be you coming in the mornings, have a good old natter with your mates about something that happened in EastEnders last night. Now clearly the words EastEnders, Holby and CSI have no place in any application form because they're not real. You'd be surprised how many I've read that do have things like that in. But the point is you can talk about enjoying informal discussions with your friends on a regular basis. And that means if you then do go to an interview and the lovely interviewer beams at you and says, tell me, what have you been enjoying discussing informally, regularly with your friends recently? You can say, if you've been watching the news, we've been discussing the world economic crisis, because it's all about being able to back yourselves up. Obviously, you don't sit there and say, we were chatting about EastEnders, because that again would be rubbish. But you do have to be able to back yourselves up. You do have to be able to talk about anything you mention in that personal statement. One of my admissions tutors' main complaints is when they meet students and they say, I have read this book by Professor so-and-so, and they ask them about it and the student says, yeah, I didn't really get past chapter 1, or I can't remember, it was so long ago. That doesn't impress an academic. So if you've talked about it in the personal statement, make sure you can talk about it in an interview. You never lie. You can guarantee that if you do lie in an application, it will be the first question we ask you in any interview, not because we've spotted the lie, but it's probably the most exciting thing you've said about yourself and we're interested. So please do not lie, it will not get you very far in an interview situation. Okay, so moving on from there, work experience, do you need it? Well, not for most courses actually. Some courses it is an entry requirement. If you want to go into healthcare or education, you will need relevant work experience. Read the prospectuses, they will tell you. And for you people, you're the lucky ones. That's your starter for your personal statement. It was during my 6 months volunteering at the local elderly care home I realised my vocation in life was to be a doctor or a nurse. And then tell us why. What did you observe? Okay, that's your starter for your personal statement. Fantastic. Other people are applying for competitive courses like media or law. It is not compulsory to have work experience, but if your friend's mum happens to work in a media company and she'll let you follow her around for half an hour, take her up on it. Obviously you don't write, I followed my friend's mum around for half an hour, because that sounds dodgy. What you do write is, I arranged a work shadowing placement for myself in a vibrant local media company. And you tell us what you actually observed. Now, you don't tell us exactly who was there with you. It doesn't matter that it's your friend's mum, she's largely irrelevant. You also don't say it was for half an hour, because again, largely irrelevant. What you do say is what you get out of it. And I followed her around becomes work shadowing placement. It sounds a lot less like stalking. So it's all about thinking about how you're coming across to these people you're applying to. Again, if you've actually done a bit of work experience back in year 10 or year 11, sometimes it's relevant to what you're applying for, but you don't need to say it was back in year 10 or 11. You can just say during my work experience. If you do need to get more work experience though for healthcare or education, please, you have to make sure that is up to date, because you have to have a realistic picture of what you're getting yourselves into. Here's what you don't put. During my work experience, I have learned lots of new skills and things. These have helped me with my A-level study. What skills, what things? I'm not psychic, you have to spell it out for me. And my favourite one, I have no relevant work experience whatsoever. Full stop. Great. Word of advice, if you haven't done something, you're not very good at it or you don't like it very much, Don't write about it in your application, then I can't ask you about it in an interview because I won't know about it because I'm not psychic. So keep everything positive. I think one of the saddest things I ever read on an application was this one. My sporting interest declined when I realised I just didn't have what it takes to be the next England defender. Great, look, I understand you guys have had to give stuff up in order to focus on your academic studies, but instead of saying in your personal statement, I had to give up the one thing in my life that was making it bearable just so I could focus on my A-level studies, why not talk about how much you've enjoyed football, hockey, cricket, whatever, and how much you're looking forward to carrying that on at university? Because it is important to show these people you have outside interests. So this is a good one. My choice of degree was confirmed when I spent my work experience in the bank. The skills I learnt there will be developed by the work placement I plan on doing in a few months. You can talk about stuff you haven't done yet. You're sending your application forms off in a few months' time, this autumn. Yes, it's not long. You're not actually going to university until autumn the following year. That means that's a whole year of masterclasses, taster days, summer schools, demonstration lectures, work shadowing placements you can talk about in your personal statements. Obviously the whole thing can't be I might do this and I might do that, but let's say you want to go into journalism and you've written to your local newspaper and you've asked them for a placement over the Christmas holidays. And you've sent your form off, you've mentioned it in your personal statement, and the day after you send your application form off, you get a phone call from your local newspaper that says, sorry love, too competitive. You haven't got the place. But you've written about it in your personal statement. What do? Well, the first thing is you don't burst into tears. What you do is you look at your sixth form. Is there a sixth form newspaper? If there isn't, you set one up. I don't mean a 40-page epic that comes out twice a week, but why not a side or two of A4 that comes out once a term to update the sixth form community on news and events? And that means if you do go to the interview and they ask you about your placement at the local newspaper, you say, well, that didn't happen because of the levels of competition. However, I used my initiative. I solved the problem. I actually set up a sixth form newspaper to update the sixth form on news and events. So you can talk about things that haven't happened yet, and if they fall through, come up with an alternative. That makes you a problem solver. Again, when you're talking about leadership skills, if you're applying for medicine, you always have to talk about leadership skills. If you're going to be talking about your leadership skills, please don't tell me how successful you've been as a Year 7 mentor. Everybody knows Year 7s behave themselves. Why not instead tell me about the time you had to take on that group of Year 9s? They're a little problem. So the thing is, if you had to motivate Year 9 students to actually get onto a task and start working, then that's a good example of leadership skills. Don't just tell me about how easy it was, because that isn't a successful leader. Okay, so just to summarise very quickly, 5 punchy starters to that personal statement. It's a work experience that's confirmed you've made the right choice of vocation. It's a subject you've studied before and you've identified the areas that look exciting from the prospectus. You've put in a quotation, you've made sure it's accurate. You haven't quoted yourselves and you've explained why it's there. Or you've put in sentences and questions that summarise what the course is all about for you. Whole point being, showing these admissions tutors how incredibly excited you are about the prospect of studying this degree at university. You're backing yourselves up by putting in lots of reference to outside reading and relevant current affairs and all the activities you've got involved in at the universities that link up with the course you want to apply for. Towards the end, it's a good idea to put in a little bit of information about what you do for fun, your outside interests. So if you're into sport, music, drama, dance, fashion, photography, you've got space for a sentence or two about that, particularly if you're very, very good at any of those particular outside interests. It's a good idea to put something in. If you read my application form, you'll see that I have face painted at London Zoo, I've run pubs, and I'm a qualified rugby coach. What that means is when I go to interviews, we talk about the things I'm interested in rather than the difficult questions. So it's always nice to have something you want to talk about on your application form. At the end of the application form, though, don't just tail off with, and I like to play the piano, full stop. Because while that's lovely, it's not actually a very punchy finish. What you need to do instead is finish off with one final paragraph reminding these people how crazy they would be to pick anybody except you. Here's what you don't put. I will be chuffed if I get into any of the 5 universities and courses I have applied for. Word of advice, the word chuffed has no place on any application form. Your English needs to be proper English, but exactly as I said earlier, don't go and swallow a dictionary. You know that little button on the computer, the one that's near the spell checker, the thesaurus button, the one that tells you words that mean the same as the word you were going to use. And I know what it's like. You've written an essay, you're not feeling very bright. You've got a nice little 2-syllable word you were going to use, and then the devil takes you. You end up pressing that glowing button on the computer, and there it is on the screen, 450 syllables. It's flashing, it's neon, and the computer says it means the same as the two-syllable word you were going to use. It does not mean the same as the two-syllable word you were going to use, so please don't use it. You'll confuse everybody. Also, words to avoid: passion and ardent desire. The words passion and ardent desire belong in the pages of a romance novel. They don't actually belong in a serious academic application, so please leave the passion where it belongs. Here's another one: starts well, goes pear-shaped. I hope that the above skills and experiences will equip me for university life, so it will not be as bad as it could be. I don't know what they're expecting, but that's really negative, so please leave it out. And one final bad one before we get to the good one. It's my favourite chap yet again. I'm sure he's fine, by the way, fixing telephones for a living somewhere, but you wouldn't know it from his application. Here we go. I hope that a degree in telecommunications will make me as good as, or better than, my uncle. He has ambition, which is marvellous, but again, not completely relevant to the application. But this is the good one. And when I read this one out, you'll all recognise yourselves. That's the idea anyway. Here we go. I hope this personal statement supports my application and demonstrates that I'm an enthusiastic, disciplined and hard-working student with a keen interest in current affairs who would enjoy contributing to all aspects of university life. In a nutshell, I'm brilliant, I've got all these skills, pick me rather than everybody else. And if any of you are sitting there thinking, actually, I'm a bit quiet, I'm a bit shy, I don't think I could be that exuberant about all of my skills and good qualities. If that's you, bless, get over it. Because for every single one of you who's sitting there being a bit quiet, being a bit shy, afraid to put yourselves forward and say positive things about your skills and your good qualities, there'll be 50 people out there. They all want your place at university or that one perfect job, and they will all be shouting, me, me, me. So why aren't you one of them? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how to write a fantastic application. Thank you very much for listening.